Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about what APRS is. So most hams hear about APRS and say, well, that's where you go to track other hams on the map. Well, that is true, but APRS is capable of way more than just tracking other people on a map. So today I'm going to talk about some of those uses for APRS, and keep in mind there are things well beyond what we'll talk about in this video. It's a really big topic that would take way too much time to talk about in a single video. By the end of this video, you'll say, wait, APRS can do that? Hopefully this will give you some cool ideas that you can go out and actually try with your APRS radio or Direwolf or APRS Fire or whatever app you might use to access APRS. Before we jump into it, let's talk a little bit about what APRS is, just as a quick reminder. So again, most people know APRS as this ham is at this point in a map. It kind of sounds almost like dial-up, what I call it, just a little short burst of that. And if you ever want to listen to it, tune into 144.390 megahertz, which is where most of the APRS traffic actually is. It sends things like weather reports, locations, telemetry, like battery life, things like that, or even a short announcement. It can be used to answer things like where is something, how do I access something, what's the status of something, what is happening locally in your area. I like to use it for antenna testing and being able to send, of course, short messages from one ham to another. But this is where it gets really interesting. So you can actually use APRS for more than reporting the location of a ham. So think of an emergency situation, you're looking for a police station, a hospital, something like that. I've been in many places to where Google Maps, so I have just a little bit of signal, but not enough to contact the internet. So I'll try to set my Google Maps somewhere and it won't work because I don't have enough service for it to find that. So APRS can actually report the location of objects and things beyond just ham, such as a hospital or a police department. It can report things like rest stops, or one of my favorite is actually ham radio towers. So another really cool thing about APRS is tactical call signs and club announcements. A tactical call sign is kind of like where you have a call sign for a group, such as the call sign CQ. Everyone who monitors that CQ group will get the messages that's sent to CQ. These tactical call signs can be used for things like net control, Hamfest, if you're trying to blast out a message to everyone monitoring the Hamfest in the area. Say everyone in your club was monitoring the APRS tactical call sign for your club. You can blast out a message about the time for your meeting tonight, and everyone monitoring that will receive it. Whether that be on the phone, on the internet, whether that be over the radio. Tactical call signs are less about locations and more about getting the message out. One cool thing I like to do with this is remote status monitoring and telemetry. So say you have a repeater or a APRS digipeater that's run on battery. You can hook up different sensors to it, and over the APRS network, it'll actually report things like battery status of your backup battery, whether the solar panels are charging, or the temperature inside the closure. That can be an important one if you have overheating issues or underheating issues if it's run off a battery. Whether a radio link is active or not, and whether the station stopped reporting. Say you have a repeater that you watch, electricity goes out, so you want to know the status of your battery. You can actually report these over APRS, and you can set up alerts or things like that. On that APRS packet, you would be able to see the status and get alerted if there's an issue. Another really cool thing that I love about APRS, every once in a while, if you look at the map, you'll see a balloon, like a hot air balloon, on the APRS. Sometimes ham clubs and things like that will send out a hot air balloon with an APRS tracker on it. And, you know, imagine this thing way up in the air, sends out an APRS message with its location, its speed, that kind of stuff. So you can track this thing all the way down. Anybody that is monitoring that is able to see it. You know, there's a lot of digipeaters and eye gates, and they're kind of spread all around. So, you know, it might fall in a spot where there's no digipeater, but chances are it'll be, you know, 200, 300 foot up in the air, it'll probably still reach a digipeater somewhere, which will get you pretty close to the area of where the balloon fell. One thing that I like about APRS, and I've actually made some contacts along the interstates and stuff using this method, I blast out the frequency that I'm actually talking on. So, you know, say you're driving up down the road on a big interstate, someone else has APRS turned on, and they're reporting their frequency that they're listening to. So, you know, you can take that frequency, program it in your radio, and you pretty well know where you're at and where you're meeting, and you're able to make a contact that way. So, for example, you know, say you're listening to the national CQ calling frequency 146.520. You know, I've called and called and called on that frequency, and a lot of times I never hear nothing back because I'm kind of in a remote area. But you take two people who's broadcasting their location and where they're at. So when you start seeing those APRS packets come through, both of you, you know, are on that frequency, then you know it's a good time to start calling and see if you can make that contact. So this is really useful too when you're, you know, trying to do an event or you're in an area and you need to talk to someone. You can see what frequency they're on and be able to switch that frequency and call them. Or send them a message on APRS and say, hey, will you meet me on this frequency? And which brings us into the next point, which is direct messages, group messages, and bulletins. You may have already heard this, you may not have, but APRS can send messages, whether that be direct messages, group messages, or bulletins. For example, you know, say you're trying to meet up with someone, you can say to them that you're running late or something. These messages can go many different paths to get to the person. So RF to RF, which means, you know, you're directly within range of RF. The cool part is digipeaters. So, you know, say you're 6 miles apart, 7 miles apart, there's buildings in the way, but there's a big digipeater in the area. So you don't have to think about what frequency that these digipeaters are on because they all pretty much use the same frequency all in the US. You know, you blast out a message, hey, I'm running late. So that hits the digipeater and goes to the person's radio. So at that point, they'll get whatever they're using to transcode those messages. Then there's things like group messages to where you can send messages to groups. So, you know, you can have a whole team of people who are listening to that group and it'll redirect that message to them. Then there are bulletins. So these are more like public announcements where there's not necessarily a person or a group of people. It's more like just an announcement that goes out. You can send those out as well on APRS. You know, if you need to blast out a message to a local area or something. So another fun thing that I really do like about APRS is APRS nets. So there's actually at least one big APRS net that I know of, and that is APRS Thursday. There is a net that goes on, it is global. Anyone in the world in that 24-hour period can send a certain message to join a group, send out their message, and you get included in that net that way. Right now I think there's around on average 700 to 750 hams who join in on that every single week. It's a really fun way. I've actually met some of the local hams that, you know, I usually put on there the state that I'm from. And a lot of times I meet some new hams in the area that I didn't even know was here. I've had conversations with people all around the world just by joining that net. It's actually a really fun way to meet people and have conversations. So that brings us to the next section. And again, this is kind of related to the emergency that I was in, the life-threatening situation. But we'll get to that after a while. Really cool thing you can do with APRS is, so there's internet connected services. So like SMS, email, IRC, and other internet connected services to where, you know, you send a message over HF. That'll eventually end up at a server somewhere that actually forwards that message somewhere on the internet. So think about SMS messages. So, you know, one thing about ham radio APRS is, you know, my wife, you know, she don't have a ham radio, she don't follow APRS, that kind of stuff. So with APRS messaging, so there's been times where my cell phone goes dead or something like that. I'm able to send her a text message. So it goes through the APRS digipeater network, hits an iGate somewhere, goes to a service where someone actually runs a text messaging service, and then my message will end up on her cell phone. So she just can respond. and it'll come right back to me over RF. So you don't have to have internet service or cell service in an area, as long as you can hit a couple digipeater chain that eventually hits an iGate. So it's a really cool feature. Again, I've used it several times when my phone dies or something like that. But there's more than just text messaging. There's email. You can send an email. You can ask things like, where's the ISS? What time is it going to pass over? Call sign lookup. There's another service called MPAD. So all these services built on APRS. So let's go through them. So ISS flyovers. Again, there was a time, life-threatening situation. I thought, well, shoot, if nothing else happens, the ISS will fly over eventually, and it's got a repeater on it. It's actually got a digipeater on it as well to get APRS messages out. When's it going to fly over? So you can actually send a message with your location, your zip code or anything like that to ISS, and you'll get a message back telling you when the next flyover is. Repeaters, for example. So there's a call sign on APRS network called repeat. You either blast out your location, give your zip code, something like that, and tell it how many repeaters you want to see, and it'll list you out the closest 2, 3, 4 repeaters in your area, and you can hook right up to it. You can look all these things up without internet. Another thing, call sign lookup. I've used it a few times where don't have internet, want to look up a call sign, just send a message to this service, and it'll come back with the name of the person, their QTH, and different things like that. And there is tons of these services, tons of them. So yet another thing that I love to do with APRS is signal testing. And coverage testing. So I've set up antennas and I've set up towers, and I've put a radio on it, and I call out, and you get a few people come back, like you don't know where that's going, how far out it's going, if people just ain't calling back, if there's nobody in that area. So one thing I love to do with APRS is, so I set up an antenna and a digipeater and put it on my car and just drive around. Put out my location as I drive around. So come back home, look at the map, bam, I can see everywhere I've reached. So I'm able to easily check out my coverage area. Even as people pass along the interstate, they are doing the same tests for you, because they're blasting out their location. Hope you learned a little bit in this video. Give me a thumbs up if you did. Give me a comment on ways that you use APRS that I haven't listed here, and hope to see you in the next one.